Hello and welcome to Byju's Exam Prep. Welcome to our weekly roundup of international relations. Under this series, every Wednesday at 8 p.m., we have been covering important geopolitical developments of the last 1 week, strictly from the perspective of UPSC Civil Services examination. So in today's session, we are going to take a look at the key developments that took place in the world of international relations during the period 28th December to the 3rd of January. And we are going to cover these 4 important topics in today's discussion. But before we start, I have an important update. This Friday, that is on the 6th of January at 7:30 p.m., we shall be having an Ask Us Anything session, which will go live on our YouTube channel. This will give you an opportunity to ask any doubts or any questions that you have with regard to UPSC Civil Services preparation. You'll get to interact live with your faculties. So don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and do set a reminder to attend the Ask Us Anything session. With this, I would like to begin today's discussion, and let's start with the first topic. We are going to talk about the cough syrup related deaths that were reported last week by Uzbekistan. As you know, Uzbekistan is a Central Asian country. Uzbekistan is a very close partner for India in Central Asia. So in this country, around 18 children lost their lives, unfortunately, as a result of consuming contaminated cough syrups, which were manufactured in India by a pharmaceutical firm known as Marion Biotech. This cough syrup, known as Doc 1 Max, has been held responsible by the Uzbekistan's health ministry, and studies and research has shown that the cough syrup was apparently contaminated with excessive levels of ethylene glycol, which is a substance which should not be found in cough syrups, because this can be very toxic, especially to children, and could affect the functioning of kidneys, could lead to cardiovascular conditions, and could eventually result in death as well. According to reports coming out from Uzbekistan, apparently several children who were infected with respiratory disorders, they were self-medicating themselves. Essentially, their parents were self-medicating them, and apparently they had even consumed excessive doses of this cough syrup. So there are 2 arguments here. One, either the cough syrup produced by this Indian pharmaceutical firm was contaminated, and this directly led to the death of these children. Or the other argument is that these deaths could have occurred due to excessive consumption of this cough syrup, or also due to self-medication. But the point is, this development in Uzbekistan has implications for India. Some of you might be wondering, how is this topic relevant for international relations? Just spare around 10 minutes and I'll help you understand why this topic is very, very important as far as India's national interests are concerned. Because this is not the first such incident which is happening. Just a few months back, a similar incident took place in the African country, the Gambia. More than 60 children, around 66 children lost their lives in the Gambia after consuming a cough syrup produced by another Indian pharmaceutical firm that is based out of Haryana. Investigations have shown that this cough syrup was also contaminated with diethylene glycol and ethylene glycol. These are toxic contaminants in a cough syrup and can be particularly dangerous for children. So these incidents have cast a shadow on India's pharmaceutical industry, and this could deeply affect India's national interests. Following this incident in the Gambia, the World Health Organization had issued an alert with regard to India-produced cough syrups. So this could not just affect India's image, but it could also hit Indian exports, Indian pharma exports, and could also affect the soft power that India has cultivated carefully over the years. Because India plays a critical role in the healthcare industry of the world. India brands itself as the pharmacy of the world. India's biotech companies, pharmaceutical companies, they produce a very large volume of generic drugs or unbranded drugs, many of which are life-saving essential drugs. These generic drugs produced in India, they are available at a fraction of a cost compared to patented drugs, which are produced by large Western pharmaceutical companies. So these cheap and reliable generic drugs produced by Indian companies, it is the lifeline of several developing countries and poor countries. many countries across Africa and even Asia and other small developing nations and the least developed countries, they all depend on drugs produced by Indian companies primarily because of the cost benefit. India also happens to be one of the world's largest manufacturer of essential vaccines, including the COVID-19 vaccine. So developing nations, small countries, poor countries, their healthcare system has been directly dependent on India's pharmaceutical industry. In many ways, India has become the backbone of the healthcare industry in other developing and poor nations. So this is one reason why the developments that have happened in Uzbekistan and the Gambia could have a deep impact on India's interests. This could not just affect Indian pharma exports to these countries and impose a financial cost on India, but it could also affect the soft power image that India has cultivated by exporting these vaccines and drugs. Through Indian diplomacy, we have been supplying essential drugs, life-saving vaccines to many countries as part of our soft power diplomacy. This helps India retain a certain degree of influence in these countries as Indian companies, Indian pharma products, Indian healthcare institutions, they have become the backbone of the healthcare sector of many of these countries. Just take a look at this infographic that we have shared over here. This clearly shows that Indian pharma exports have seen a very big jump in the last 7 to 8 years. There has been a 103% increase in India's pharma exports, and this has enabled India to place itself as the pharmacy of the world. So this carefully cultivated image, along with Indian exports, could take a hit because of these incidents. Now, UPSC could potentially ask a mains question over here, or even a related prelims question. Because of these developments, there could be a question on India's role in supplying drugs and vaccines to other countries as part of our diplomatic initiatives. So this is where you need to understand the role Indian pharma industry is playing in Africa's healthcare system in particular. Especially African countries in Southern Africa, Western Africa, Central and Eastern Africa. Many of these African nations are heavily dependent on the cheap generic drugs produced by Indian companies. So let me just give you a few important facts over here which could help you write a good answer, a solid answer for any such question. Please note that India is the leading supplier of low-cost generic medicines to Africa. We have even overtaken China and other countries. India provides Africa with 45% of all the generic medicines that are consumed in Africa. And according to latest reports, 20% of our pharma exports is headed towards Africa. So this is vital for Indian pharma companies as well. It's a key component of their revenue. Over the last 1 decade, India's pharma exports to Africa and the rest of the world has more than doubled, as I pointed out. And in the last 8 years in particular, you see that our pharma exports have jumped by almost 103%. Our total pharma exports stand in the range of $24 to $25 billion. So this is a very significant component of India's exports. And it's not just the pharma industry of India, even the hospitals, the scientific research institutions of India, the healthcare institutions of India, they are playing a very big role in Africa's healthcare sector. Now, all of this could take a very big hit because of the image that could be getting created as a result of these incidents. Many hospital chains of India, they have invested heavily in Africa's healthcare sector. India has become the third largest investor in Africa's healthcare sector. So these companies, these hospitals, the pharma institutions, they could all face a backlash because of this incident which has happened. Now please understand, these incidents come at a time when Western countries were seen to be stockpiling vaccines, especially the COVID-19 vaccines. Whereas on the other hand, India was displaying a humanitarian gesture and we were supplying vaccines as a goodwill gesture to many friendly countries in Africa. For example, under Mission Sagar, India dispatched free vaccines to many African nations like Mozambique, Seychelles, Tanzania, and others. India plays a critical role, as I mentioned, in the healthcare system of many of these African countries, and the Western countries would be looking for a reason as well to target India's pharma exports. Because this is not just about safety, but there is a geopolitical angle, a geo-economic angle as well. Large Western pharma companies could use these incidents to target and tarnish India's image in order to hurt Indian exports to Africa. So even though India has shown a goodwill gesture and carefully built a soft power image, all of it could face a hit because of these developments and the way in which large countries, Western countries, could react to these incidents. Please note that Southern and Western African countries are the biggest beneficiaries of India's pharma exports. These countries rely on India to even tackle life-threatening diseases such as HIV/AIDS. As you know, in many African nations, HIV/AIDS is widely prevalent, and the antiretroviral therapies that are available and other drugs and medications which are available to deal with HIV/AIDS, they are very expensive, especially the ones produced by Western pharma companies. So these countries depend on the generic drugs produced by Indian pharma companies, and it has become a key component of Africa's efforts in combating HIV/AIDS. India's pharma industry has already become the backbone of Africa's fight against HIV/AIDS. So with regard to healthcare as well, there could be a setback in African countries if Indian exports to these countries are affected because of these incidents. So that is why this development is very, very significant, and we need to examine how India has responded to these events. India, of course, has reacted proactively. We haven't been defensive in this regard. We haven't tried to avoid the blame. Rather, India has taken up the responsibility, and when the first incident happened in the Gambia, the regulatory institution, the CDSO under the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare, which is the nodal authority for ensuring drug safety and drug standard, immediately launched an investigation and even shut down the concerned pharmaceutical companies and many other drug producing industries in India. Those institutions which are not following the mandated quality and hygiene standards, they were targeted in these rounds of investigation, and the Drug Controller General of India, who heads the CDSO, has been taking proactive and immediate action against many pharma companies, especially the small and medium-sized companies. Because these small, medium-sized companies, they are known to cut corners, and this could potentially result in a situation where these drugs could become fatal to the consumers. So India even conducted its own investigation into the previous incident that happened in the Gambia, and it submitted the findings to the Rajya Sabha, and India informed the Rajya Sabha that these deaths which happened in the Gambia a few months back, they couldn't be directly linked with the Indian produced cough syrup. India argued that these drugs which were flagged by the World Health Organization, they were found to be of a good quality. The required quality standards were apparently met according to India's investigative report. However, India is not trying to avoid the blame here. After the recent incident in Uzbekistan, India has reached out to these countries. We have even reached out to WHO, and we have sought more data from them, more information from them, to see whether we can link these deaths with the cough syrups that were produced in India. It's very essential to establish this on the basis of scientific evidence, because it is possible that these deaths could have happened because of overdosage or self-medication as well. India's argument is that we still haven't been able to establish a one-to-one causal relationship with the deaths that have happened and the cough syrups. It has to be scientifically proven that these deaths happened because of the consumption of the cough syrup, and that hasn't been done. And hence, India has reached out to these countries to work with them, to cooperate with them, so that we can find out what really happened. And if there was a problem with the drugs produced in India, then India is looking to act on it seriously. It becomes very important for India to ensure that the drug safety standards are maintained and enforced in India, because this is not just a crucial component of our exports, but it is also vital for India's soft power image across Africa and the rest of the world. So that is why this topic is very, very relevant for international relations. Now, let's move to the second topic. We're going to talk about India and Pakistan, because India Pakistan have an agreement in place that deals with nuclear installations in both the countries. This agreement was signed back in 1988, but every year this agreement comes back in news. And just last week, on the 1st of January, India Pakistan, they both exchanged a list of all the nuclear facilities that they have with each other. This is in accordance with the agreement that the two countries have signed regarding nuclear installations. Both the sides, they strictly abide by this agreement. Every year on the 1st of January, they will exchange a list of nuclear facilities with each other so that the other country knows exactly where the nuclear facilities of the other country is located, irrespective of the state of diplomatic relations between India and Pakistan. Both the countries ensure that they respect this agreement and they exchange the list of nuclear facilities and installations. Even when tensions are high between India and Pakistan, even when diplomatic relations are completely broken, even then, both the sides honor the commitment. And on the 1st of January every year since 1992, both the sides have been exchanging this list of nuclear installations. So in this context, we need to understand the background to this agreement. Why was this agreement signed? Why was it necessary? And we should also understand the significance of this agreement. As I was mentioning, this agreement, which is formally known as the Prohibition of Attacks Against Nuclear Installations and Facilities, it was signed in the year 1988 between India and Pakistan. It entered into force in 1991, and since 1st January 1992, since then, every year, at the start of every year, on the 1st of January itself, both the sides, they provide each other with the exact location of their nuclear installations and nuclear facilities. Now, you might be wondering, why are India and Pakistan doing this? What's the reason behind it? What's the logic behind it? To understand that, you need to examine the context in which this agreement was signed. See, the 1980s was a very sensitive period in the India-Pakistan relationship. India-Pakistan relations were dominated by tensions, hostility, and conflict during this period. In 1971, as you know, India had defeated Pakistan conclusively while liberating Bangladesh, and India had broken the country into two parts. So since then, India-Pakistan tensions remained high, and it was in 1970s that both India-Pakistan accelerated their nuclear weapons program. So this had automatically increased military tensions between the two countries. Then in 1987, the Indian Army carried out a military exercise that was codenamed Operation Brass Tacks, which was an exercise to test India's preparedness to carry out deep offensive operations inside Pakistan. This exercise triggered an alarm in Pakistan and increased tensions between the two sides. Ever since, India-Pakistan both have feared a potential attack on each other's nuclear facilities. Because it is possible that either India or Pakistan, they might get involved in an incident where they might have deliberately or accidentally targeted the nuclear facility of another country. The consequences of any such incident can be devastating for both the countries and for the entire South Asia region. Because in 1981, there was one such incident that happened in West Asia. Israel, which was targeting the nuclear weapons program of other West Asian countries during this period, launched an aerial strike against Iraq's nuclear facilities. Now the fear is that if a nuclear facility which is storing radioactive material, if such a facility is attacked even with conventional weapons, it could result in a major nuclear disaster and it could be treated as an act of war that involves the nuclear element. Now, just imagine a hypothetical scenario. Let's say India-Pakistan have gone to war and Pakistan is launching an airstrike against India, and accidentally Pakistani Air Force might end up hitting a nuclear facility of India. If Pakistan is not exactly aware as to where India's nuclear facilities are located, there might be an accidental strike or even a deliberate strike. Even a deliberate strike could be possible, where conventional weapons are used to target a nuclear facility. Such an incident will result in a nuclear disaster, it will lead to contamination, and at the same time, it could be treated not just as an act of war, but it could be treated potentially as a nuclear attack on the country. Now, this would push India in this hypothetical situation to retaliate, to react and respond by using its nuclear weapons to punish Pakistan. So, any such scenario is a nightmare scenario. So, it's very essential to avoid any confusion, any deliberate or accidental attacks on nuclear facilities during peacetime and as well as during conflict. So, that is the reason why both the sides clarify each other's position through this agreement. It helps avoid the confusion. It helps each other understand where their respective nuclear sites are located. The term nuclear installation here or nuclear facility not just includes the nuclear reactors and the nuclear plants, but includes every other facility associated with the nuclear program of India and Pakistan. It covers civilian nuclear facilities where highly enriched uranium could be processed, could be stored. It includes fuel fabrication facilities, isotope separation facilities, reprocessing facilities, and even all the other facilities that are involved in the weapons program, the defense nuclear facilities. All these sites, the list of it is compiled along with its exact location, the exact coordinates, the latitude, longitude is shared with each other, and they do this diligently every year on the 1st of January. So that both the sides are aware as to where the nuclear facilities of the other side is located, and they can ensure that they will never target these nuclear facilities either accidentally or deliberately. So this treaty is binding on both the sides. They have to provide the list at the start of every year, and it acquires a great deal of significance considering the nuclear posture of India and Pakistan. See, India's nuclear doctrine is based on a few important pillars. One of the key pillars of India's nuclear doctrine is the no first use policy, which means India has outright stated and committed to the world that we will not be the first country to use nuclear weapons against any country. Is that clear? India has given up the first use option as a matter of its doctrine, as a part of its nuclear doctrine. But however, if there is a first nuclear strike, then India will respond effectively, and India will definitely carry out a devastating second strike. To ensure this, India has established credible deterrence. India has built up a credible stockpile of nuclear weapons and delivery systems, and India has even achieved the nuclear triad status, which means India can deliver nuclear weapons through all the mediums, through land-based delivery systems such as ballistic missiles, through air-based delivery platforms such as fighter jets which can carry nuclear missiles, and as well as through underwater submarine launched missiles which are carried on nuclear-powered submarines. So India has achieved the nuclear triad status, which means we have established our credible second strike capability. Now, this being India's nuclear doctrine, imagine a scenario where Pakistan might accidentally or deliberately hit India's nuclear facilities with conventional weapons, but the resulting nuclear disaster might be treated by India as a potential nuclear attack on India. So this would force India to retaliate with a devastating second strike. Or imagine the other scenario where India might hit a nuclear facility in Pakistan accidentally or deliberately, and imagine how Pakistan might react to that. Because Pakistan has no clear-cut doctrine like India. Pakistan has deliberately kept its nuclear doctrine ambiguous to put India on the back foot. Apparently, Pakistan has even developed tactical battlefield nuclear weapons, which can be more easily deployed. So considering the implications of such an incident, both the sides have put in place this important agreement to provide for clarity to each other as to where their respective nuclear sites are located. So that is the reason why this agreement is very important, and you should be aware of the key provisions of the agreement as we discussed, the background to it, and the significance of this agreement. With this, I would like to move on to the third topic for today, where we are going to take a look at an important country located in the Indian Ocean region, that is Maldives. we are going to talk about few recent political developments that have taken place in this island nation and use this opportunity to understand India-Maldives relations and how Maldives has gone through a period of political crisis in the recent past. So first, let's understand the context. Let's understand why Maldives has been in news, what's the political development that brought Maldives into attention. Last week, the criminal court in Maldives has sentenced former President Abdullah Yameen, whom you can see in this image over here, for a period of 11 years in prison after being held guilty for corruption and money laundering charges. Yameen Gayoom has been a very interesting figure in South Asian and Indian Ocean politics, because don't forget, Maldives is a South Asian country, right? Located in the strategic Indian Ocean. Maldives is a neighboring country of India. So the developments that happen here in Maldives, especially the political and security developments, they're of great interest for India. So Yameen Gayoom, who has often shared a very complicated relationship with India, has been held guilty of serious charges of corruption and money laundering and has been sentenced to a jail term of 11 years. So this is going to prevent Yameen Gayoom from contesting next year's presidential elections. In 2023, Maldives is headed towards presidential polls. So Yameen Gayoom won't be able to contest. And this has an impact on India. And let's see why. Let's understand why this political development is relevant. First, I will have to explain the strategic significance of Maldives to India. As I was mentioning, Maldives is a small island nation. It's an archipelago of thousands of small atolls that are spread out across the Indian Ocean. It occupies a critical location, a strategic location in the Indian Ocean, as you can see in the map, and it is also a maritime neighbor of India. We in fact share maritime boundaries with Maldives. Is that clear? Maldives is also a South Asian country and it is part of the SAARC grouping along with India and other South Asian countries. So India is heavily focused on Maldives, not just because of its vital location in the Indian Ocean, but because India-Maldives share a lot of common interests. Of late, China has been stepping up its influence and presence all across the Indian Ocean, and Chinese influence has increased in the last 10-12 years in Maldives as well. India has historically shared a very close relationship with Maldives in all the domains, be it political relations, economic relations, defense and security relations. In all the domains, India-Maldives have been very, very close historically. But in the recent past, we have seen turbulence in India-Maldives relations, and it has been potentially linked with Chinese interference. This is what makes Maldives very vital for India's interests. You might have heard about the Sagar Doctrine of India, which was launched by Prime Minister Modi in 2015. The Sagar Doctrine focuses on assuring security and growth for all the littoral countries in the Indian Ocean. And Maldives is one of the focus countries under the Sagar Doctrine. India has often treated the Indian Ocean as its own strategic backyard, where India has always been the dominant influence all across the Indian Ocean. Starting right from West Asia to Africa and Southeast Asia, across this entire breadth and width of the Indian Ocean, India has traditionally been the dominant power. But recently, external influence in the Indian Ocean has increased. It's not just China, even the United States, European countries, Russia, Australia, and many others, they've all stepped up their military and diplomatic presence all across the Indian Ocean. The US, in fact, has a major military base located down south of Maldives at the Diego Garcia Islands. That's located roughly over here. So there are many major foreign military powers that have a presence in the Indian Ocean, and India would like to counter any such external influence to ensure that Indian Ocean remains India's traditional backyard. So Maldives plays a critical role here to project India's influence further down into the Indian Ocean. So in this vital country, India has shared very close relations with Maldives. It was in 1960s, around 1965, that is when Maldives gained independence from colonial rule. Since then, India has established very close relations with this island country. Even if you go back to medieval times, historically, India has shared very close ties with Maldives, various South Indian kingdoms. They had connections, political, cultural, and economic connections with Maldives, right? The Cholas, for example, exercised influence in Maldives back in that era. So we do have very close cultural, political, and economic ties that dates back to the pre-independence era as well. So as soon as Maldives became independent, India reached out to this small country and we built a very close partnership because Maldives is very, very vulnerable. It does not have a stable economy. Since the country is made up of hundreds of small islands, it doesn't have a self-sustaining economy. Its economy is largely dependent on tourism and fisheries, etc. But this could lead to instability and volatility in its economy. And Maldives is also highly vulnerable to climate change and rising sea levels. It's vulnerable to a number of security threats because it is possible for an organized criminal cartel or a terror outfit or pirates who have a presence in the Indian Ocean to capture an island of Maldives which is uninhabited. So all these are major concerns for India. Any instability in Maldives is of direct concern for India as it affects our security and economic and national interests. So India has established itself as the first responder as far as Maldives is concerned. Whatever crisis Maldives has faced in the past, India has been the first responder. For example, in 1988, Maldives was attacked by a Tamil militant outfit based out of Sri Lanka known as PLOTE. This was a coup attempt to topple the then president, Maumoon Abdul Gayoom, who was a very close friend of India. This was a coup attempt to remove the government and to assassinate the president of Maldives. So when this crisis occurred in Maldives, Maumoon Abdul Gayoom reached out to India and immediately India launched Operation Cactus, through which Indian Special Forces, Indian para-commandos of the Indian Army were para-dropped into Maldives by the Indian Air Force. The Indian Navy was also dispatched to surround Malé, the capital of Maldives, and very quickly India defeated this coup attempt. Operation Cactus was a major success for India because we protected a friendly government and restored normalcy in Maldives. Ever since, Maldives has been very grateful to India. Maumoon Abdul Gayoom has always been a very close friend of India, even though he himself was a dictator. He was in power for almost 40 years, from 1978 to 2008. Throughout this period, under his dictatorship, India and Maldives have enjoyed very, very close relations. Maldives has always given India priority, and it has adopted something called India First policy, which means Maldives always gives the first priority for India as far as its foreign policy is concerned. Later in 2004, when the Indian Ocean was hit by a devastating tsunami, again it was India which responded. India dispatched assistance, disaster management assistance, and we extended HADR assistance, humanitarian assistance and disaster relief to Maldives. Recently, there was a water crisis in Maldives as well. A desalination plant was affected because of a fire accident, and this had affected water supply, drinking water supply in Maldives, because Maldives is very heavily dependent on desalination, takes seawater and converts it into potable water. So during this water crisis as well, the Indian Navy dispatched water aid and supplied water for a few days to help Maldives sustain itself. So India has always been the first responder, and thus it has established its firm influence, diplomatic and strategic influence in this country. Until 2008, India was the predominant power. Then later, Maumoon Abdul Gayoom stepped down and Maldives transitioned into a democracy. Elections were held and a party known as MDP, the Maldivian Democratic Party, won these elections, and its leader, Mohammad Nasheed, became the president. Mohammad Nasheed was also a very, very close friend of India, and he continued the India First policy. Mohammad Nasheed was in power for 4 years until 2012, but that is when trouble began in the India-Maldives relationship. Just 1 year before this, in 2011, China had just opened its embassy in Maldives. Ever since China established its formal diplomatic presence, trouble started in Maldives. The very next year, there was a highly unfortunate development where opposition leaders such as Yamin Gayoom, who has currently been sentenced to a jail term, he would lead an opposition against Mohammad Nasheed. There was an internal crisis where a corruption case was going on against the former president, Maumoon Abdul Gayoom, who is none other than the half-brother of Yamin Gayoom. In these cases, the president Mohammad Nasheed, he felt that the judiciary, the Supreme Court of Maldives, was being biased towards the former president. He ordered the arrest of judges, which triggered a constitutional political crisis in the country, and opposition leaders like Yamin Gayoom capitalized on this opportunity. With the support of Maldivian police and defense forces, Yamin Gayoom ensured that Mohammad Nasheed was removed from power. Now imagine, Nasheed was a democratically elected leader, and overnight he was removed from power and a transitional government was put in place. Even before India could react, these changes had taken place and India eventually recognized the new government headed by Yamin Gayoom. Following this, Yamin Gayoom would order the arrest of Mohammad Nasheed on various charges and placed him under arrest. Elections were held in 2013, but Mohammad Nasheed was not allowed to contest the elections. Yamin Gayoom would win these elections and would become the president of Maldives from 2013 to 2018. And this was a nightmare period for India, because under Yamin Gayoom, India completely lost its influence in this critical country, as Yamin Gayoom was seen to be adopting an anti-India approach. He was seen to be favoring China, and of late, after stepping down as the president, that is after 2018, he has been leading an anti-India campaign known as India Out campaign. Ever since Yamin Gayoom became the president in 2013, immediately Maldives cancelled an important project. The GMR airport project at Malé was cancelled. It was taken away from India. This vital connectivity project at Malé was being executed by an Indian company, that is GMR Infrastructure. This Indian project was cancelled and the same airport project was handed over to a Chinese company. Immediately, Maldives joined China's Belt and Road Initiative. Not just this, Maldives even amended its constitution, which would allow foreigners to own land in Maldives. This apparently was done to allow Chinese companies to purchase land in Maldives. Following this amendment, Maldives transferred a strategic island, the Pheodu Finolu Island, to a Chinese company to develop connectivity infrastructure, which meant a Chinese company would be building airport and seaport facilities on this strategic island, the Pheodu Finolu Island. So India saw all these developments as a direct attack on India's influence, on India's interests. Parallelly, there was a rise in radicalism, extremism, and terrorist activities in Maldives. We saw a rise in many right-wing extremist outfits, and there was a sudden surge in extremism, and many Maldivian nationals, they even joined Islamic State, and they've traveled to Iraq and Syria to fight for the Islamic State. India had reasons to believe that Yamin Gayoom was partly or fully responsible for these developments. This was the most difficult period for India during this period, and in fact, Prime Minister Modi even boycotted a visit to Maldives in 2015. When Nasheed was arrested and when he was not allowed to contest elections, India saw this as an assault on democracy. Since elections were not being held transparently in a free and fair manner, India boycotted the visit. Prime Minister Modi did not visit Maldives in 2015. Instead, he travelled only to Mauritius and Seychelles to launch the Sagar Doctrine of India. So throughout this period, India's ties with Maldives was seriously compromised when Yamin Gayoom was the president. But fortunately for India, things changed in 2018 when Yamin Gayoom lost the elections and the Maldivian Democratic Party, which has been very friendly to India, won the elections and Ibrahim Soleh became the president. Ibrahim Soleh is seen as a pro-India leader, a very close friend of former President Mohammad Nasheed. Immediately, Ibrahim Soleh restored the India First policy, which aligns with India's Neighbourhood First policy and Sagar Doctrine. So since 2018, India Maldives have rebuilt and repaired the damage in their relationship. But parallelly, Yamin Gayoom, who was in opposition, was leading the anti-India campaign known as India Out campaign. He was pushing for ending Indian influence in Maldives, to cut Indian investments. India has even gifted a number of defense platforms, including aircrafts, ships, surveillance equipment. And Yamin Gayoom wants all of this to be removed. He essentially wants to end India's military presence in Maldives. So India has often seen the politics of Yamin Gayoom as a strategic threat. And now that he has been held guilty on corruption charges and jailed for 11 years, he won't be in a position to contest next year's elections. And this would likely be a welcome development as far as India is concerned. It's in this context the developments in Maldives become important. You should know this background. You should have an idea about the political crisis that happened a few years back and how India was affected by these developments. Now, coming to the last topic for today, India, Austria have signed a key agreement. India's Foreign Minister, Dr. S. Jaishankar, has paid an important visit to Austria, the European country, and both the countries have signed the Comprehensive Migration and Mobility Partnership Agreement. This agreement enables the easier movement of Indians to Austria, especially Indian students and Indian professionals who travel to Austria in large numbers to work and settle in the country. It will ease the immigration process. It will enable the easier mobility and easier migration for Indian students and workers and professionals who are looking to study in Austria or work and settle in Austria. Parallelly, it will help Austria to deal with a pressing challenge, which is illegal migration. In the last few months, Austria has been flooded with illegal migrants. Is that clear? According to data, Austria has received more than 1 lakh illegal migrants from around the world, and they have been seeking asylum. Many of them are seeking asylum. Many of them have entered the country illegally. Out of these 1 lakh illegal migrants, 15,000 of them are from India. That's a massive number. There has been an explosion in the entry of illegal migrants to Austria because of various crisis situations that are going on around the world. Austria generally had a very relaxed policy with regard to illegal migrants, refugees, etc. So from around the world, including India, thousands and thousands of illegal migrants have tried entering the country, and according to the Austrian government, more than 15,000 Indians have entered Austria as illegal migrants. Is that clear? Austria has even complained that Indians who are seeking to enter the country illegally are using the route from Serbia to cross over into Austria. So this has become a challenge for the Austrian government. It affects India-Austria relations as well. So to put an end to such illegal migration, there was a need for such a partnership agreement that regulates migration and mobility. For Austria, this is particularly important because since 2021, there has been an exponential jump in the number of Indians who are applying for asylum in this country. Most of these Indian illegal migrants who are trying to enter the country, they are seeking better livelihood. They are seeking a stable life, a better standard of living. But since they don't meet the strict eligibility criteria for a visa, what they do is they try to enter the country illegally, and many times they seek asylum on political grounds. So to put an end to this menace and to ensure that Indian students, Indian professionals who are traveling legitimately to the country are not affected, this vital agreement has been signed. Now this agreement has a much wider implication because India has signed similar partnership agreements dealing with mobility and migration with many other European countries, including France, United Kingdom, Germany, and Finland. Please remember this fact, very important for your prelims. India is very eager to finalize and sign these migration and mobility partnership agreements because we are looking to finalize the India-European Union Free Trade Agreement. The India-EU FTA, also called the BTIA, the Broad Trade Investment Agreement, it has been pending from many, many years. One of the objections from European countries is that there is often a huge inflow of illegal migrants from India into these countries. So they fear that if a free trade agreement is signed, it will not only enable the free movement of goods and services, but it will enable the movement of people as well. So European countries are concerned about an increase in the flow of refugees, asylum seekers, and illegal migrants, particularly from India. This has become one of the hurdles in finalizing the FTA between India and EU. That is why India is fast-tracking the signing of these partnership agreements with the members of European Union. We have signed these agreements with France, Germany, Finland. Of course, UK is not part of EU, right? But we are looking to finalize similar agreements with other countries so that we can go ahead with the India-EU FTA. Of course, there are other issues as well with regard to movement of goods and services that are holding up the FTA agreement. But issues related to mobility and migration is one issue which is holding up the free trade negotiations. So that is why this agreement we have signed with Austria holds significance for India and as well as European Union. If this FTA is finalized with the EU, and if we can sign similar agreements with other important European countries, it will immensely benefit Indian students and Indian professionals who are traveling to European countries. It will also help those countries to arrest and regulate illegal migration from India, thereby protect the relations with India. So that is why this development is very significant and it's of importance for our exams. So with this, I would like to bring today's discussion to an end, and I hope it has been a fruitful session. Do let me know how the session went by liking the video, share your comments below, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Thanks for watching. Good night.